Hello and welcome to Just a Damn Nerd. Thanks for clicking on the video. Now, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. It really helps out. And today, we have a good one for you, as we have two of the biggest games, maybe the two biggest games of 2022 going head to head. They could be the two biggest games in nearly every year they had come out in any other year. Our first competitor is the incredible God of War Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok is a sequel to God of War 2018, which is a reboot of the God of War franchise. God of War Ragnarok has been an absolute triumph for Sony, becoming the fourth best-selling video game of 2022 and in only a couple months, and is exclusive to the PlayStation, meaning there is no PC Xbox version to actually prop up those sale numbers. The game has won a ton of game awards, including winning 6 game awards at the Game Awards show. It has been a great year for God of War, and it's really propped up the PS5, making the PS5 a must-own console since God of War Ragnarok is not available on PC. And against any other game, God of War Ragnarok would walk over it with a massive victory, but its opponent may even be more critically acclaimed. Its opponent is Elden Ring. Now, Elden Ring is the most beloved game of 2022. There is no doubt. The fans of this game love it so much, it's insane. There's a reason they love the game so much, and it's an addictive, entertaining video game. It has had maybe the most surprisingly great year of any game. It spent most of 2022 as the best-selling game of the year until Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 showed up to knock it off. But it finished the year as the second best-selling game of 2022. It's also cleaning up in the Game of the Year awards, winning the vast majority of Game of the Year awards over God of War. It also won the Game of the Year award at the Game of the Year show, and its massive, unquestioned success has allowed more people to experience the FromSoftware formula, for better or worse. Elden Ring has been a massive triumph. So the point of this competition is to be as objective as possible. We try as hard as we can to take personal opinion out of it. So these two games will be competing in 6 total categories: story, gameplay, graphics, music, exploration, and fun factor. So each category will be worth 10 points. Now, not all 10 points are awarded based on a win. We actually will be giving percentage of each points based on how much you win by. So you could have a 5-5 tie, a 10-0 win, a 6-4 win, and this way a game doesn't lose a category by 1% and then completely lose all 10 points. Seems more fair. So let's get this started.
Round 1. Fight!
So, God of War truly nails the old Bungie opinion that a video game really boils down to repeating the same 30 seconds over and over again, and it truly nails that 30-second gameplay loop. It's actually got one of the more addictive combat engines in any action game, in my opinion. So in God of War, you can take on enemies with melee, range, and some limited elemental effects. You also have Atreus or Freya, who will help you in combat.
Now!
The side character adds more variety to the combat than you'd expect, as it allows you to press a button for them to attack enemies, normally with range attacks. These range attacks make it easier for you to slam enemies with elemental effects. God of War's combat engine truly boils down to careful parrying and dodging. The game will kill you in seconds on its harder difficulties if you make mistakes. God of War also offers a variety of difficulty options. This is greatly appreciated, as it has easy, normal, hard, legendary, and insanity. These difficulty options make the game more accessible to everybody, but also make the game extremely challenging. If you play the game on Give Me God of War, you will be playing a game that absolutely will destroy you and doesn't care if you go home crying. So Elden Ring is a more refined version of the FromSoft combat style. Unfortunately, Elden Ring does not offer difficulty options and is extremely unforgiving to new players and old players alike. It's just unforgiving to everybody. However, Elden Ring and the FromSoft combat in general is about careful, strategic attacks. You need to take time to learn the pattern of the game's larger enemies. It's true you can just rush in and blitz the smaller enemies and normally stun lock them and kill them before they can even attack. But if you want to fight the larger enemies, you need to carefully watch and learn their pattern. Where Elden Ring truly shines, especially in this competition, is in its variety of combat. The game has a deep and intricate magic system. A half-baked stealth system, a good range system, and several different forms of melee combat, including shields, heavy weapons, two-handed weapons, and a ton of other variety. It gives you more freedom to approach combat situations in any way you want. You don't have to attack every enemy the same way. Every boss in the game can be defeated with magic, melee, or range. This allows you to play the game more the way you want to play it, and is definitely one of the best things about Elden Ring. Also, once you do start to get better at this combat engine, you can easily become more sucked into it. And if you're the kind of person who already prefers patient, careful timing to hardcore blitzing, then you'll probably prefer Elden Ring's combat over God of War's. God of War offers more intense, hardcore action, while Elden Ring tends to be more strategic. However, Elden Ring does offer more variety. Elden Ring's combat does have some things I hate. Like, I find the game's in-game menu to be kind of clunky. Having to siphon between weapons and healing packs by pressing down and right and left on the D-pad while you're being attacked by enemies feels needlessly clunky. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that God of War's lack of combat variety could easily frustrate people. Unlike Elden Ring, you cannot approach every enemy and boss in the way you think is best. You're forced to attack in the way the game thinks is best. Also, its counter and parry system can sometimes feel a little bit robotic. Both of these games have extremely frustrating difficulty spikes, and sometimes it feels very unfair when you die. God of War also offers easier ways to escape from certain areas, as there's stuff like Spartan Rage, which you can save up and use on more difficult areas. I find this to be appreciated, but I know some people truly hate it. Also, God of War has the difficulty options, meaning that you don't have to play the game on beat your head against the wall difficulty unless you choose to. This is also greatly appreciated. However, the more you think about these two games, you find that both have standout parts. I love God of War's hardcore blitzing, its Spartan Rage, its ability to rip opponents apart with Kratos' bare hands. However, the more strategic combat and more variety offered by the Elden Ring combat engine allows for more freedom to approach encounters on how you want, plus the fact the game's an RPG is something I vastly prefer. I also always have loved to play games as a wizard, which is how I played most of my time with Elden Ring. And while it's true, as we all know, that the damn nerd doesn't find the FromSoft formula very fun at all, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that tons of people do. I can't just discount their opinion because I don't necessarily agree with it. So the more I think about these two games' combat engines and their pros and cons, the more I realize there's not too much to distinguish them against each other. Neither game truly stands above the other, as both have some very frustrating cons and some very fun pros. So at the end of the day, round one is a 5-5 tie. Up next is graphics. Graphics are so important. Hell, some people buy video games exclusively off how their graphics look. We always like people better with a pretty face, and both of these games have a pretty face. Here we go.
Round 2. Fight!
Elden Ring is a truly beautiful game. Its indoor environments and texture detail are incredible. And I absolutely love the game's boss design and character design. It also has a great atmosphere that is lifted up by the game's beautiful visuals. There are not too many games that have such an incredible look about them, as you find yourself kind of just wanting to stand there and stare off into the distance. In a lot of ways, it kind of looks like a painting. And it's just amazing how abstract everything is, like it exists in a nightmare. God of War is an absolute graphical powerhouse, a game Sony made to stand out. God of War's visuals are so incredible, the game holds up well against top-end PC games. It has excellent reflections. It even has stuff like snow deformation, and the grass will sway in the wind, and everything Kratos walks into is affected by the character model. Also, the character detail is incredible. The camera zooms in close on the characters in many cutscenes, and you cannot see any imperfections. Hell, the hair on Kratos' beard looks great. Also, the facial and motion capturing in this game are great, which is fantastic for a game that is so heavily based off its story. It is an absolutely beautiful game. Elden Ring is beautiful, but unfortunately in a competition with God of War Ragnarok, some of its cracks start to show. For example, the grass doesn't move when your character walks through it in Elden Ring. The game also draws in shadows at a very close distance, even in an NVIDIA RTX 4090, meaning that you can see obvious shadow pop in as you're walking through the world. This can be unfortunate and distracting. The game also relies heavily on traditional screen space reflections, which in this scene here, you can see how the reflection disappears every time I look down with the camera. Like God of War, on the other hand, uses a combination of screen space reflections and light ray tracing. This means that the reflections don't tend to disappear when you move the camera up and down. Also, everything in the environment is heavily affected by you and the enemy character models, making your character feel much more grounded in the world. God of War also has far higher character detail and seems to run at a better frame rate, even though one of these games is being played on the PlayStation 5 and the other is being played on a PC with an NVIDIA RTX 4090. Of course, Elden Ring can get a little bit back into the competition with its art design, which I think is actually better. God of War's art design tends to be very grounded in reality, while Elden Ring's is like a dark nightmare. However, there really isn't much of a comparison between these two games in visuals. It's pretty obvious that God of War is a technical powerhouse and Elden Ring has many shortcomings. So the winner of this round with a score of 7-3 is God of War. Up next is the often underappreciated and often forgotten music. But music is what ties the whole thing together. Without a good soundtrack, it'd be really easy for a fun game to feel like it was missing something. Music is critical. And here we go.
Round 3. Fight!
Both of these soundtracks are absolutely incredible. I love the high octane intensity of the God of War soundtrack. But I can never get enough of the orchestra sound of the Elden Ring soundtrack. I absolutely love both of these soundtracks. I've actually listened to both of these soundtracks while editing videos, and I have to say they are both incredible. However, it is completely impossible, in my opinion, to pick a winner between these two. So, for the second time in this competition, we have a 5-5 tie. Up next, exploration. Now, exploration is critical to basically any game. You need to feel invested and you need to want to actually wander around the world, because if you feel like you're being handheld from point A to point B, it feels too robotic, and games just aren't fun when they feel robotic. So, here we go.
Round 4. Fight!
Elden Ring actually redefines what exploration in a video game means. You see, most games have to rely on quest markers, map icons, annoying fetch quest, and a dozen other little gamey tropes in order to get you to explore certain environments. The problem is, the environments in most open world games are so repetitive, you don't feel the desire to actually explore them unless you're gonna find something to upgrade your character. Elden Ring managed to completely buck that trend. It doesn't need anything to make you explore. As a matter of fact, exploring this game is the most fun part of it. It has that kind of dreamlike art style, so every time you find a new area, you feel rewarded. It feels like the game developers took the time to hand create most of the environments in the game, meaning that each new area feels rewarding to discover. You can also find weapon and gear upgrades by exploring, so the game does reward you for it.
Well,
You were right. The state is broken.
explains our trespassers. What happened here?
God of War takes a very different approach to its exploration. It uses that modern Doom style, where every area is a self-contained smaller area, allowing you to explore, but still staying linear. This always has certain advantages, like allowing the developers to hand-place combat scenarios, equipment, gear, weapons, events, and roaming bosses. It allows more control for the developers to control the pace of the game, allowing for more immersive combat experiences and gear questing for the player. It also allows developers to control how quickly you level up your characters, so they can control the combat scenarios, preventing you from over leveling or under leveling. So there are awesome advantages to the semi-open world style. Against any other open world game, God of War's semi-open world style would give it a massive victory. Typically, semi-open world games tend to be more fun, as they tend to be more immersive with more entertaining combat, and they feel like they have more to do. And God of War certainly exemplifies this. God of War has these semi-open areas that you go into with plenty of stuff to do. I had so much fun wandering around and kicking down doors to collect treasures, weapon upgrades, gear upgrades, and destroy enemies. But God of War does a great job of making it all feel like it's linked in with the game's story. However, the biggest problem for God of War is its opponent here. Elden Ring has the most meaningful open world since Skyrim. It is the best part of Elden Ring. Exploring this game's open world is absolutely incredible. It feels like no matter what you do or where you go, there's always going to be something to see and something to do. I haven't played a game ever that's this big where I just wanted to wander off the map for 20 minutes to go see a chair sitting in the middle of nowhere. It's also unique art style, and an occasionally random boss encounter can be quite fun. The only thing that holds Elden Ring's open world back from being god tier and actually maybe even being a notch above Skyrim's is the fact that it has some repetitive areas and tremendously frustrating repetitive open world bosses. But the game does mostly avoid the open world pitfalls. So the winner of this round with a score of 7-3 is Elden Ring. We are all knotted up, and I think it's fitting because the next category I believe is the most important category in any game, especially action RPGs, because this is story. Now, story is the motivation for me personally. I don't particularly care to play a game if I don't have a reason beyond just shooting things and getting new guns. And here we go.
Round 5. Fight!
Whatever Loki's supposed to be doing, he's supposed to be doing it now. Asya. My story doesn't end hiding in these woods. I didn't mean to.
Intent does not matter. Only consequences. He is dying.
You're a good boy. A brave boy. Fast and strong. But you can rest now. Okay? I'll be okay. You can let go now. You have to let go.
God of War's story picks up a little bit after the end of the first game, and we see that Atreus has grown. He now has a desire to get revenge on the gods for the death of his mother. And the game does such a good job of telling its story. There is no doubt that God of War is built around its story. Everything you do in this game is in service of the story. Each and every rivalry and each and everything from the first God of War game, or the God of War remake, I should say, carries over to God of War Ragnarok. And in a lot of cases, it actually takes a step forward in the story category. It's amazing how well these characters work together. If you haven't yet played this game, then you're missing out. The story will stick with you after you've turned it off, and the characters are all just so damn likable.
The fallen leaves tell a story. The great Elden Ring was shattered. A war leading to abandonment by the greater will. And one other, whom grace would again bless. A tarnished of no renown. Cross the fog to the lands between. To stand before the Elden Ring.
Elden Ring's story is definitely more low-key than God of War's. Elden Ring relies more on environmental storytelling and occasional cutscenes. Well, the game's main story was written by George R.R. Martin, which made me very hopeful that this game's story would be very good. Unfortunately, the majority of this game's story doesn't really start coming into focus till after you've played the game for 50 hours. However, what's here is actually pretty decent. The game focuses mostly on being mysterious as you push across its world in order to find the Elden Ring. It doesn't tell you too much, and it just tries to string you along just enough to keep you going. There is no category in this competition where the two games are more diametrically opposed to each other. One is super low-key on its story, while the other is heavily story-focused. Being low-key on your story doesn't mean you're not good, though. Take Half-Life 2, for example. However, I do think Elden Ring falls well short of being even remotely considered to be a decent story. It seems like what's here is kind of just generic, and unfortunately, the story of Elden Ring is by quite a large margin its weakest point. The problem here for Elden Ring is that God of War has one of the best stories of any video game I think I've played, while Elden Ring just leaves a lot to be desired in story. The winner of this category, an incredibly one-sided 8-2, is God of War. We have reached the final round, which is Fun Factor, which is basically a combination of all the other rounds. But before we get into that, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It truly helps out. And I hope you guys have enjoyed the video to this point. So now, when you start breaking down these games in their entirety, it's very difficult to find a massive difference. As you guys saw in this video, God of War has a few advantages, and Elden Ring has a few advantages. Really, the only massive difference between them were the story qualities. While Elden Ring has a gameplay loop that seems to have millions of people hooked, I find the story to be lacking, as well as I believe many others probably would agree with. And its visuals, while nice, definitely do not hit the level of many modern AAA titles. God of War seems like it would be flawless on the surface, beautiful graphics and incredible story, but some frustrating combat and a lack of combat variety holds the game back from being perfect. However, both of these games have their shortcomings and flaws. So here in the final round, we come down to the nitty-gritty. Elden Ring would have to have an 8-2 win, and that would create a whole mess, as it would just be a tie. But when you actually look at the competition in its entirety, it's pretty clear that these two games are almost even. So, for the first time ever, the final Fun Factor round is a 5-5 tie. Which means the winner of God of War Ragnarok versus Elden Ring is God of War. Alright, thanks for watching. Hope you guys will come back next time. As always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And I'll see you guys next time. And as always, this is a Damn Nerd signing out.